Hello again, friends, and welcome to SCLC Today TV. I'm Maynard Eaton, and of course, our president and CEO, Dr. Charles Steele Jr. Dr. Steele, perhaps the hottest issue in the country today, the most divisive, raging, controversial issue, is critical race theory. Virginia is in an uproar. Tennessee is in an uprour. Other states in an uproar. Some 25 states have voted against teaching the history of racism and sexism in America. It's become a real mess in terms of controversial. Your thoughts about why that's happening?
Well, first of all, as we're dealing with redundancy, as we talked about for many of our programs, Maynard, America has not come true with the historicity of this country. It has never been in the forefront of why we are the way we are. America has never wanted to share in anything, including the profits within this country. That's why slaves worked for nothing and during the transatlantic African slave trade. This country, and I continuously say it, this country must go through a healing process. Just the other day, there was some concern about the fact that people need the philosophy or the Kenyan philosophy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. now more than ever. And we are here to say that we've been talking about the healing process. And we must understand until we as former slaves, we as African American must realize that as well. We come from the transatlantic African slave trade, which brought Africans here to America on slave ships. We are enslaved.
The white folks don't want their students, white people don't want their kids to hear that. They don't think they should be blamed for what happened. They're fighting vehemently saying, my children don't need to hear that. Don't want to know
That's
that.
right.
It's old
That's
history,
right. That's right. And it's another escape route, you know, like of someone just trying to get away from the truth and trying to escape the facts. You know, it's just like being addicted to whatever. There are many addictions out there. It's more than just drugs and alcohol. Whatever you're addicted to, until you come face to face with it, man. You know, the 12 steps are eradicating racism and the historicity of telling where we come from in terms of the transatlantic African slave trade. There are steps. So we are just as guilty as someone who's addicted to alcohol or addicted to some form of drug, due to the fact that we are addicted to not telling the truth as a country. We're addicted
What does your wife say? What does your daughter say? Both educators, both classroom teachers. Will that harm folks hearing that truth? Does it damage their students in early grades learning that whites have been racist most of their life and sexist?
Well, first of all, my wife taught a high school history course called Southern History. She wanted to call it African American history from slavery, but the school board would never approve of it. And she didn't give up. She kept pursuing it, and she discovered, I can teach this subject matter, but I need to call it something else. She called it Southern History. And guess what? The facts were taught. She did not relinquish on teaching those young people, black and white, of what the historicity of the Emancipation Proclamation meant. Also, in terms of Juneteenth, all of that was taught during her years of teaching. She didn't combat them or go to fight with them about, you can't teach that. She changed the subject matter. You got to know how to bring about a resolution to a problem without being a problem.
She changed the subject line, not the subject matter. She taught the same thing, just had a different name, right?
Are you trying to correct me, Mr. Eden?
How do we correct those in these different states who want to curtail that education. Some teachers are being threatened with their jobs if they tell the truth or teach the truth.
Well, most school boards are not going to come in there and be so dehumanized in terms of firing these teachers who are committed and have passion to do what they're supposed to do in the rightful way of educating our people, both ethnicity of all aspects of the human race, black, white, green, or blue. All aspects of ethnicity should be taught. And these people are committed. They're not concerned about a job, because I have to go to the spirituality of being the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. God will always make a way, but you must start that first journey by the first step in resolving and eradicating the mindset of what folks trying to do by proving to them that you're so passionate about what you are doing that you are not going to give in to what is wrong, but you're going to prevail and pursue what is right.
Well, talking about prevailing, seemingly the right thing to do, the For the People's Voting Rights legislation did not prevail in Congress, did not prevail in the Senate. Seemingly, where countries, our parties, political parties are divided over voting rights. Are they really saying black folks are cheating? Is that the issue here? Are they blaming us for doing something wrong in the polls?
What they're really saying is that we're not going to share the power. That's what they're saying, man. We're not going to share the power. It's all about control and power. You will be subservient to us. You came to this country as slaves. You came and we created another system within a system called Jim Crow. And we had segregation, and we also had an opportunity to keep all of the wealth. How did America get to be the richest country in the world? Because they had slaves, and they don't want to talk about that. They got it the wrong way by dehumanizing and treating people of color, including the Indians and other ethnicity or people, black and brown, in a very discriminatory way, and removing us from decision-making process in terms of making decisions that will betterment not only our people and people of color, but the entire community, country, and ultimately the world. So we must realize it's the history of this country that prevails by people in Congress and all the way down to state government and local government saying we're not going to share in the profits and we're not going to share in the power. That's what it is. Well, and that's
SCLC changed that. SCLC changed that years ago. How do we prevail now? How do we change that? How do we reverse that anti-voting mythology of the anti-voting sentiment among our elected officials? I mean, many states have cut back on votings.
Man, we must realize we can never rest on our laurels. See, it's just like getting a touchdown. And you score 2 touchdowns in the first half. Like my wife said, we went to sleep at the wheel. You know, you got a semester and a 6-week examination when you're in school. You made an A the first 6 weeks, but you got cocky and you rested on your laurels and you missed the remaining 12 weeks of school and you flunked the course. But the first 6 weeks, you got an A. But the last 6 weeks, you flunked. That's can overlap, and that can be a lesson for us to understand, not only in the classroom, but in the school of life. You never go to sleep. You never get egotistical in your thinking and think you got it made. As soon as you accomplish something, there's always someone trying to take it away from you. I know in training in business, and I talk to many business people. I just got in from Phoenix, Arizona, talking to a cadre of business people. And what we were talking about was trust and loyalty. How can you get people to buy into trust and not to stab you in the back and not to get your ideas and not be committed and loyally to the folks that brought you to the table? We came up with a fact that you must develop a mechanism called trust. How do you do that? By treating everyone the same in the way you want to be treated. Just like our grandmama and parents taught us and granddaddies. You got to treat others as the way you want to be treated. Do unto others as you will have them do unto you.
Your colleague, Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King III, not Jr. III, Martin King III, is launching a new voting rights march to expand the right to vote in response to what's happening in Congress. He says it's going to be held not like his father, not a march to Washington, but he says it's going to be held in several key cities, including Atlanta. What's your thoughts on that, or are you working with them on that?
Well, I was with Martin III a few weeks ago, but I'm always supportive of Martin Luther King III, and we worked together many a times. We did a program on the mall in D.C. Just a year out before Section 4 and Section 5 was gutted. Martin Luther King III and I shared the podium at that particular event. I saw him visually speaking in terms of the march, which he said you'll be getting back with other details. I'm always supportive. He always included me. So how can I not be inclusive and supportive of the King family? They've been a friend of mine for many of years, as well as Mrs. Coretta Scott King, whom I admire to the highest. So I'm always applauding and supportive and standing not behind but beside Martin Luther King III and the family.
We saw a lot of young people marching this summer over Black Lives Matter, police protests, anti-police protests. Will you think they'll march for this, voting rights? Will they stand alongside Martin III in this effort?
Yeah, because the message
will make it different.
Yeah, it'll be different. The message will be different. This particular event, several events that Martin III will be orchestrating, will be done in a technologically manner in which there will be a strategy, there will be a training, there will be people exposed to understand that we're going to know who's in this march. And it's welcome to all who about nonviolence and constructively supporting the leadership. You got to know how to march in a march, and not everybody can be on the front line, but you have marchers. So what Martin III will do, he will go out and find the best orchestrated marchers that will be involved with this march, that will guarantee the safetyness and the safety valve, and have a very successful nonviolent approach. That's how Dr. King was assassinated. When he led the march in terms of the sanitation workers, AFL-CIO and all of them in the union, that was not Dr. King's march. He went there because some of his friends locally asked him to come, we need your help. But the invaders, who was a gang there in Memphis, Tennessee, was infiltrating that march, and that's what brought about the violence aspect of it. Molotov cocktails was thrown into businesses and so forth. And that's led Dr. King to the fact and the point that I'm going back to Memphis, and I'm going to prove people wrong. I don't lead a march that's violent. We're going to have the next march, and nobody going to have any violence results. That's how he got back to Memphis, to prove that nonviolent works. But somebody else had another plan. Some other folks had another plan. And ultimately, he was assassinated.
Dr. Steele, you talk about nonviolence, you talk about violence. Gun violence is a #1 topic in most cities across America right now. Crime. Your thoughts on that? I mean, it's seemingly it's overtaking everything. Everywhere you look, shootings are occurring.
And, we don't condone any form of violence. But again, we have to realize that it all drives back as well to economics. Dr. King also believed that everyone who's a citizen of this country should receive some type of monthly compensation to guarantee their superb anticipation of having a quality of life that will be second to none. And America doesn't share. And it's catching up with America. Not to say that this is all of the problems, because America refused to share the profits to those who are less fortunate and those who are disenfranchised. It goes back on everything that you can imagine to economics.
Dr. Steele, let's be honest. I mean, we've talked about this earlier. A lot of this is black on black crime. These are black folks doing violence and gun violence, shooting, killing each other. That's got to concern you. It's got to be troubling. I know it is to me.
It has to be focused upon economics as well. People. It's because black folks don't have no economics, no potential of economics. How many baseball professionally clubs do we own? How many NBAs do we own? How many automobile dealerships do we own? How many manufacturing companies do we own? Because we can't even participate in getting a loan from the financial institutions. Even with the bailout. The bailout didn't go back to poor people who was ripped off by the system or the financial institution. But the bailout went back to Wall Street and to the financial institutions who brought about the subprime in loaning money to people who was disenfranchised from the get-go. And the government gives the money back to them. Too big to fail, too big to go to jail.
Amen. Finally, our finest hour, I guess, in the SCLC year of activities, our July 23rd convention. Poverty, the pandemic, and the polls. Talk about this, sir, the triple threat. What will this convention say and do, you think, in your estimation?
But those three different layers of our convention will capture the headlines in terms of the theme. Poverty, the pandemic, the polls. Mr. E, that's it in a nutshell. Poverty has been with us forever. I remember coming from a shotgun house in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and the big ditch was our recreation component. And you talk about the pandemic. And I'm concerned about the number of lives that we lost, and primarily majority were black lives because of the lack of health care. And of course, the polls. Here we are needing a second Emancipation Proclamation because folks are trying to take us back. The civil rights movement has gone full circle, and we must understand that we can't tolerate going back again. But we must understand also we can't go to sleep at the wheel. We can't go to sleep in the classroom and get an A and think that's for the year. You have to always be consistent. The consistency of fighting, the consistency of loving, the consistency of collaboration, working together, not grandstanding, not trying to be the only person that leads the flock and the only person that gets the recognition. It ain't about no recognition. It's about the team working together. I was listening last night to the Atlanta Hawks coach in terms of Nate saying that, McMillan saying to the commentator, he said, my guys have a chip on their shoulder. That's what brings them together. That's what Trey Young said. He said, we play with a chip on our shoulder because nobody cared for us. None of us made the MVP. None of us went to the All-Star game. We were seated as number 5. but we beating number ones and number twos. We have a chip on our shoulder. That's why we play so good. Mr. Eden, I'm conveying to you and the audience tonight, we must have a chip on our shoulder and succeed non-violently and go all the way. Not only should we dump the ball, we should dump it with two hands rather than one.
Go Hawks, go SLC, go Dr. Charles Steele. I'm Maynard Eaton. This has been SCLC Today TV. See you next week.